welcome you guys. My name is Christensen. I'm a farmer from Dartmouth, and one of the things that we've been involved in since we moved to the South Coast last year is trying to support garden activity, knowing full well that access to local produce from the local farms is sometimes a difficult thing for community members, and we kind of want to encourage people to start growing some of their own food. And there's been a lot of publicity about this just in the last week or so. I don't know if folks have seen it in the newspapers, but Michelle Obama and the White House chefs, of course, were breaking ground on their new White House garden, which was really, it's a grassroots campaign that, it's been around for a while, but really picked up steam during the fall last year. A number of groups calling for them to replant a victory garden in the White House. So I think there's a lot of interest right now around the issue of gardening, and certainly if the economy continues to struggle, which I think for the most part that's somewhat of a foregone conclusion, unfortunately, there's going to be more and more interest in it's a good introduction place, is to start talking about crop families. And when we talk about crop families, the reason that we want to talk about them is for a lot of growers, it's important to maybe be able to rotate your crops a little bit this year. And obviously, if you have a very small garden space, you have limitations to that. But still then you have a little bit of capacity to make sure your tomato plants or your pepper plants aren't in the same place season to season. And so on the front of that blue sheet, you'll see a listing of the real common vegetable families. And what I'll do is I'll go through the list of those common vegetable families, and maybe what we'll do as a way to have a conversation about those is to volunteer favorite varieties, or if there's a crop or a type of something that people have great experience with in the past. And I'll share with you a couple of the varieties that I really like to grow. Did you have a question? No? Yep. So, and these are listed in alphabetical order for the crop families. These are the most important vegetable families. And the first one on that list are alliums. And the alliums are the onions, the leeks, the garlic, the scallions, all those things that tend to have, long, skinny green leaves. And in the allium family, this is the time of year to get your onions or your leeks started. A lot of those crops, leeks need a long season to grow. The onions, most onions are what we call daylight sensitive, which means as much growth as they can put on before the summer solstice is the determinant factor in their bulb size. So what that means is we want to get our onions started early. And if you have a warm space or could create a cold frame to start your onions outside, it wouldn't be too early to start your onions outside right now. There will be a crop a lot of the seed companies will sell what are called sets, where you can order actual onion plants that have already been started probably in a location a little further south than here, and then you can put those sets in the ground. That's another great way to get into onions. But the nice thing is, when I think about vegetables, my real interest is eating vegetables. And so a lot of times when I'm working through my families, I start thinking about, well, what's the reason to plant this or that? And obviously onions, they can play such a tremendous role in our diets in all types of dishes. And for people who haven't had gardening experience, I like to say, well, onions aren't always the easiest crop to have a nice, successful onion crop with. They don't compete with weeds very well at all. They take a while to germinate, and then once they grow up, it's not like a squash plant that can really kind of shade out the weeds. So an allium plant that I would say is a better place to start would be something like a scallion or a chive, where you can put a thicker planting down, and you don't have to have that pressure to get it in the ground by a certain time. You can plant scallions all the way up till pretty much mid-July and get a scallion crop at the end of the season. So that's our first family. It's the allium family. The second one on the list are the brassicas. And the brassicas are a really important vegetable family because there's so much that they contain. And they're one of the hardest things with crop rotation because we tend to plant a lot of brassicas. The one that's probably the most important in this part of our community is kale, which figures into a lot of Portuguese cooking. Kale is one of the more important parts of the brassica family. Cabbages are brassicas, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, those are all brassicas, as well as a lot of short season crops like radishes or mustard greens, or arugula, or Asian greens, all these things that are starting to, you start seeing them at the market, you start seeing these lettuce bags that have things that aren't looking like lettuce leaves. A lot of those are brassica greens. And they're actually a terrific crop because, one, they're about the easiest thing to get to germinate. Brassicas will, in the height of the summer, if you plant them, they're often up in 3 or 4 days. They have a lot of versatility. For the shorter ones, like the arugulas and the radishes, a lot of them don't like heat. And what that means is we will plant a spring crop and a fall crop, but we won't be planting radishes right on through the summer. So we might plant our radishes from right now. We could put radishes in the ground. So what that means for our brassicas is we're planting a spring crop and we're planting a fall crop. So right now is a great time to start planting radishes. I normally don't plant radishes past the 1st of May because oftentimes if you plant them past the 1st of May, you start running into that summer heat in June that gives they just go up, they don't get a nice crisp root. Eventually they get what's called pithy, where you cut it through and there's little holes in your radishes. And people, when you eat a good radish, to me, it's got to have a little bit of snap. And those height of the summer radishes, they're not really a snap to it. So the next item on the family names are the chenopods or the chenopods. And those are the spinaches, the Swiss chard, and the beets are the ones that are most common of that family. Spinach is a classic spring green. It doesn't like summer heat. It'll handle the fall as well. But spinach is a great thing to think about sowing now or in the next couple weeks. Goes in about the same time as peas. And because it doesn't like the heat, what it has a tendency to do come June is it has a tendency to bolt, which is what to send up its own seed stalk. And so if we can get our spinach started a little bit earlier in the season, we have less problems with that bolting going on. Spinach, Swiss chard, are people familiar with Swiss chard as a plant that they planted that in their gardens? I've seen some people yes and some people no. Swiss chard, it's got a real earthy flavor. It's kind of like a beet. But pound for pound, in terms of square footage, it's one of the best producers for the amount of food. And the advantage that Swiss chard has over spinach is it can handle that summer heat. So you can put a couple Swiss chard plants in and pull the outer leaves off of as you're harvesting through the spring, meaning May and June, starting to take some of those smaller leaves off. And you can keep that plant going right on through the summertime and into the fall. So if you haven't tried Swiss chard, it does have a kind of a strong earthy flavor, which some people aren't particularly towards. But it's a really great crop to kind of think about.
Like with some olive oil and onions.
You can do a lot with it, and it doesn't. The nice thing I really like about it is it doesn't cook down quite the way that, if you're sautéing spinach and you're starting with this big bowl full of spinach and you actually cooked it and you said where'd it go. The Swiss chard doesn't have quite that disappearance factor. So. And then the other thing about Swiss chard is for folks that work in perennials or flower gardens. Swiss chard, there's a variety called Bright Lights or 5-leaf silver beet that is real popular as an ornamental. So if you have a garden that you're looking for a little bit of that aesthetic, the Swiss chard, these Bright Lights varieties, the multicolored stems, they're one of the more beautiful plants that you can think about putting into your gardens.